While there's plenty of anime that have a really good final boss, a final stage, a big action set piece, I think there's very few that can live up to what Grand Order Babylonia is doing, with something that is supposed to be the end of the world, something that's going to push our characters to the point of extinction, and actually have something feel like it lives up to that threat is a really refreshing feeling, as if every time, like, okay, yeah, anime, you think you defeat the boss even in a video game, but then it gets a second form. But the idea that this, like, mother of life literally is indestructible, and the only hope they may have is by putting her in the underworld, surrounded by the dead, and hopefully they can win that way, but even then, there's only currently like 500 people left in the kingdom. And the best that they can hope for is that they can keep the culture alive so history will remember. That actually feels like something that's living up to the destruction tags that it's been laying out since the very beginning, and not feeling underwhelming in the slightest. The only thing that could feel underwhelming is maybe the visual design that is, yes, 3D, it's CGI, and I mean, that's not really surprising considering how pretty much every giant beast that we've seen has been. The only issue was, I think the texturing was definitely off on certain shots. Like, sometimes it did look very jarring, almost like you were looking at a PS2 or PS3 cutscene, right? And then it was kind of applied to 2D images. But when it was in those wider shots, I actually thought they blended it quite well, especially with the kind of like, almost like sunrise, sunset sky looking that is just so dark and cloudy and moody. Some of the shots did look very well, but then when it kind of just pulled away and just really kept the focus on the 3D model, it was like, okay, maybe let's cut away and look at another character. But I think similar to any of the action set pieces that we've seen so far, once there's actually action happening and she's moving and she's fighting and the characters are interacting with her, not just standing by with their jaws on the floor realizing how screwed they are, I don't think it will be as jarring just based on everything that we've seen so far. But yes, I definitely wished in those more static scenes that it was hand-drawn. But obviously time will tell with how they're going to incorporate her going forward. That was really the only part of the episode that was a little jarring to me, was like, okay, some of those up close and personal shots didn't really like looking at. But in terms of the rest of the episode, I mean, it kind of looked like a movie. The amount of like lighting and just the way they shade things and detail it, it feels like the way the water's crashing and just the sky is crumbling or opening up. It honestly feels like something you would typically see with a movie production in their final boss or something like that. And that's something that Babylonia has been doing a great job at really bringing the production to the absolute peak that it could be to make it feel like the end of the world. And based on the characters' reactions, they definitely feel like it is the end of the world. I've complimented this a ton, but it just keeps being even more relevant the deeper I go into this anime. The level of despair these characters have, it actually makes us feel the same, because we're not a part of any anime sequence, so to make the viewer feel the exact same way the characters do, it can be a challenge. And often in a series like this, I feel like the characters just generally are a little too optimistic for their own good, meaning the viewer never gets the same sense of worry most characters in this world probably would experience when faced with basically the apocalypse just on their doorstep. But having Fujimaru and just Ishtar and all them seemingly one-shot the boss, right? And no one thought it was going to be a one-shot, especially when we're not even like the second to last episode yet, right? However, for them it did make sense, especially if the readings go away, it seems okay, hey, we used a command seal, maybe this was enough because we caught her at the appropriate moment. And to see how their eyes go from so optimistic to just they're ready to give up, that's the level of detail you really want to see, especially for a show that is basically saying this has been a very long and stressful journey for Fujimaru. This should feel soul-crushing and shattering, and the fact that every step of the way that he was slightly getting a little bit better, it almost felt like he kept getting thrown down even more flights of stairs when he realized, especially when Gilgamesh says that they have less than basically 500 people remaining, and just like succeeding is just going to remain, you know, their culture and history. Like, that is soul-crushing. And yes, by the end of the episode, there's definitely a lot of funny and charming moments, but a majority of the episode, especially when things were happening, like, you know, it just felt like there was no hope. You kind of felt like this was going to be a failure, and it still easily could be a failure, but they keep giving it just that slight level of optimistic nature to make us say, well, what if they can succeed? And the way they're incorporating the writing from the characters to just the way the world is reacting and being destroyed, it really does feel like the perfect endgame for Fate Babylonia. Something I've really enjoyed about the command seals in this is, yes, if you play the game, you get command seals basically every day, but this, even though it's based on a mobile game, it's clearly an anime story, and as we can see, Fujimaru's seals aren't just randomly coming back to him after a good night's sleep. this is something that he clearly needs to go back to the main hub world to most likely get more command seals. So the fact that he has one remaining, it's going to be interesting to see how he'll put that to use in the final stages, because I think if he could recover them, he probably already would before going to fight Big Mama Boss. And that's going to be really fun, because as we've seen with the whole shield ability, and then we also have just the sky opening with this like nuclear bomb going off, there's a lot of really interesting ways to make the command seals in this show very interesting, and I'm curious to see how the last one will be incorporated, whether we get it next week or the final episode or however they're going to incorporate it, but also combined with everyone. It's going to be incredibly interesting, because I think, something like a good defense will probably be needed in the final battle, and who knows if they're going to succeed. I mean, we can definitely tell that most of these characters aren't getting out alive. Most of the world has already been killed, right? And every time we think something's going to go according to plan, it just feels like, yeah, that's not going to work out either. I mean, the Erish content was amazing, and I think the perfect way to kind of just relieve the tension in the air, especially since she was just casually being a goof and just talking to Gilgamesh, not realizing that the others were there. So once she did realize, she was very much a more mature person, more elegant in beauty and grace, and I love how pretty much this would be so easy to write as just being like, are you kidding me? But the fact that she said that it takes about 10 years to basically drag the world to the underworld, and the fact that she's hated them for so long that she's already been doing it, even though it's convenient for the plot to say, I need 3 days, the fact that she did hate the world for so long, and clearly if it wasn't for Fujimaru, she would continue to have that resentment, it makes it feel like both, yes, it's important for the plot, but the fact that it just kind of makes sense for her character was such a hilarious and perfect way to decompress the viewer, and basically the characters in general, to say, oh shit, you need 10 years? Yeah, we don't, oh, you only need a few days? That's great, but I'm definitely going to have a talking to you once they leave, because you were going to do what to my kingdom? We're going to have a chat. Like, that was just such a perfect moment, and I thought that was all we were going to get for really, like, insane comedy in just moments to relieve the tension. But the fact that they also gave one with Ishtar, I think was perfect, because, they're just doing this chant, right? Everyone's getting in, just trying to hype her up as if you have the beast we need, and she doesn't have it. The fact that Gilgamesh made her hold, like, I'm a bad goddess, son. Like, this show, the fact that we're looking at the end of the world and we can still find ways to incorporate that comedy, it says a hell of a lot about how good the character banter is in this show. It's not like they're doing this in the face of her, like, she still is marching, right? It's gonna take her a couple of days to get to them. So it doesn't feel jarring like the comedy is out of place or anything like that. If this was to happen in the middle of them fighting her, yeah, that would be very pointless and stupid, because you're literally facing the end of the world. But having them in the safety of their kingdom for the time being, it totally makes sense to have these comic reliefs. And I feel like anyone who's got up to this point in the anime probably enjoys at least some of the humor that this show has presented, especially since in the second half of this anime it's been a lot more dominating. So I doubt there's going to be many disappointed in either Erish or even Ishtar's just little ridiculous banter and how they incorporated themselves in this episode. But I definitely think it was the perfect way to kind of like relieve tension, but also keep the tension up by saying, like, the things that we need we don't have, but we'll try. And I think episodes like these definitely highlight how good of a leader Gilgamesh is, because even at the face of like his kingdom being destroyed, he has hardly any soldiers and troops left. He knows, should they even survive, there's no way to actually keep the kingdom going, because there's not enough people to sustain their economy, to be able to grow the crops, get the livestock, things like that. It just isn't enough. There's no way for them, especially, like, what can they do? But they still aren't giving up. He's still invoking confidence. He's still invoking confidence in people who are ready to give up, even our central heroes. And I love how both him and Fujimaru, I think together, that's the reason this hasn't fallen apart. Gilgamesh by himself not having any of these heroes, I think may have had a little bit of a different tune, but I think he still would have said the same things, just he would have recognized he was going to his death guaranteed. But the fact that he has Fujimaru and them there, it kind of makes him feel like there actually is a very slim chance that they could succeed, and who knows what the future will bring. And for Fujimaru, he really is believing in the confidence and leadership of this man, and in doing so, it gives him confidence to be the leader that he needs to be for his party. Like, that kind of back and forth and that leader dynamic has really made the show exceptional, in my honest opinion. And I'm really loving how the endgame's playing out, because usually what you would get is you'd get something like this, and then you get 1 or 2 more episodes. But the fact that the endgame has been multiple episodes watching humanity be ripped apart by these disgusting creatures popping up from the ocean, just ripping and laughing like children, it is so disgusting and horrifying to watch it all play out, and to see how much content we've actually had for an endgame, that literally a third of this anime was just the final stages, which you don't get to see too often. I think really goes to show how good of a idea bringing Babylonia to life on an anime production was, because I think a lot of people can look at mobile adaptations and say it just feels like an advertisement, or it just feels like the mechanics of the game, but you can definitely tell that this isn't just feeling like a gacha adaptation. There definitely are moments and elements like the kind of like growing harem that he's kind of built, and just how many characters are there. You know, you're collecting your waifus, your husbandos, things like that, of course. But in terms of how the characters are actually functioning, how they're implementing themselves, how Fujimaru isn't just sleeping a day and getting another command seal or something like that, it actually is showing that it feels like an anime first and foremost, and an adaptation of a gacha game second. And that's something you don't get to say too often. It is getting more common. I definitely think mobile adaptations are getting better with time, but it still isn't perfect a majority of the time. So it's nice to see shows like these really succeed as both generally pleasing the players of the game, but also pleasing people like me who have no experience for this story in the game, feeling like it is an anime first and foremost. The show is doing a lot right, and honestly the only thing that was distracting in this episode was the few minutes that we saw the CGI mother just kind of rising up, and they really focused in on it, where the texturing wasn't the best, but honestly that's not going to be too big of an issue, especially when they actually start fighting her, and we're going to see all the characters moving around rather than just having her dominate the screen. Based on how they've handled 3D boss battles before, I think it's generally going to look pretty good in the long term. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, be it for game players, anime originals like myself. What did you think? And where do you think it's going to go next week? Do let me know. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time everyone, please take care and have a good one.